interessant war an dem Austausch, dass wir sehen konnten, wo die Unterschiede liegen zwischen den amerikanischen Problemen genauso wie den deutschen Problemen und was man da verbinden kann, beziehungsweise was man auch anders machen muss dort.
Using deus.net is a good way to keep in touch with my German colleagues and discuss solutions and other interesting problems that we've had and ways to solve them.
Ich finde das DEUS-Netzwerk gut, weil wir so einen Einblick direkt aus erster Hand von den Studenten aus Amerika kriegen und das viel interessanter ist, als es aus Büchern zu lesen.
It's a very well thought out platform and rewarding for American students who get to come to Germany and experience firsthand the completed projects and those that are still in progress and be able to imagine what can be done in the United States.
Das ist natürlich auch tatsächlich produktiv. Also ich habe von jedem der Seminare irgendwas mitgenommen, irgendeine Anmerkung, irgendeinen Gedanken, an dem ich nochmal angeknüpft habe, wenn ich zurück war.
Wir als Wirtschaftsentwicklung in Bochum haben gute Erfahrungen damit gemacht, uns am DEUS-Netzwerk zu beteiligen. Wir können Ihnen nur empfehlen, sich auf der Plattform anzumelden, zu registrieren und dann in Kontakt zu treten mit den deutschen und den amerikanischen Experten.
In 5 years' time in deus.net, I would hope that we have different partners from different countries and just that we have more activity even than today and a larger group who actively participates.
Seien auch Sie dabei, kommen Sie zu uns und kreieren Sie Ihr Profil auf deus.net und treten Sie in den Austausch mit uns ein.
So, welcome everyone. My name is Stefan Bartke. I hope you can hear me. You should have been able to see a short introduction or a short video. I'm not 100% sure whether this worked out. I'm joining today from Frankfurt, from a hotel with some slight connection problems, but I can assure you that our presenters of today's webinar have array connections and they will come in soon. Let me just very briefly introduce you to the framework of that webinar, which is the project DEUS.net. DEUS.net, that is a network of young and senior professionals who are interested in shaping sustainable, resilient cities ready for tomorrow, ready for the future. As a network, DEUS.net is a non-for-profit network that facilitates the exchange of ideas and innovations, the access to expert knowledge, and by that also the access to markets in Germany, the US, and beyond. You can find more information about DEUS.net on our website, which is just the name as the project. DEUS.net is quite regularly conducting webinars. We have done so on a couple of projects and topics that are linked to sustainable and resilient city development. And here you can see just a bunch of them that took place over the last year, for example, by Tamar Shapiro from the Urban Institute on Assessing Transatlantic Exchange on Urban Revitalization, a webinar that was quite interactive, discussing what we know what works and what doesn't. A couple of webinars by Raimund Schwarzer from UFZ focused on sustainable financing of and adapting to climate change, climate financing. Another one by Herbert Dreiseitl, you might know him, quite world famous architect, focused on the potential of urban space in cities to be climate ready and livable. And as a core maybe of the history of DEUS.net, we have a strong focus on brownfield redevelopment and regeneration, and have focused here, amongst others, on a specific case study in Bochum, a place where we also conducted our previous summer school, and where the pictures were taken from the video that you might just have seen or can access via our website. And also one that was on the redevelopment of environmentally burdened sites, given by Kirsten Roset and Ingo Quas, a project that was conducted both in the US and in Germany. So DeosNet is actually about that, bringing ideas from the US to Germany and from Germany to the US, discussing them together to explore where we have options to learn from one another and to give ideas to one another. And you can access all these webinars on our website. Before starting into today's webinar, my last slide for the moment is to already let you know that in a month's time, on July 1st, we will have another webinar presented by John Modlock and Scott Truex, both professors at Ball State University and related to the Sustainable Communities Institute, who will talk about smart cities and show us a perspective beyond technology towards including a social perspective and dimension. So look forward to that with further information on the specific timing to be announced on our website soon as well. In today's webinar, I am very glad to welcome two distinguished ladies on the US side who have been involved for a couple of years in the support of Brownfields communities who are looking for inspiration and also for funding and for support in dealing with contaminated land. And on the German side, another distinguished company leader and supporter of communities. In particular, I am glad to introduce you to Johanna Roth, who graduated from Berkeley, received a Bachelor of Science in Conservation and Resource Studies with a focus on environmental health. And Johanna is now working with CCLR, the Center for Creative Land Recycling in California, where she is a manager of communications operations and for Region 2 in the US events and workshops. She will be joined by Dr. Sabine Martin, who is working and has been the director of the Kansas State University TAP program for 10 years and now is president of CETOR Solutions, a small business providing assistance to brownfield communities. Sabine has a master's in geology and a PhD in hydrogeology from Liebig University in Germany. Both CCLR and KSU have been main partners in co-executing the TAP, the Technical Assistance to Brownfields Communities program by the EPA. So both ladies will give the start of our webinar today. And after that, Roland Arns will join the discussion, who is Managing Director of the AAV, which in German is for Verband für Flächenrecycling und Altlastensanierung, which translates to something like Association for Land Recycling and Contaminated Land Remediation. He's member of the board of the Engineering Association, ITVA, so a renowned expert in Germany on quite everything that relates to land management and land recycling. So we are very proud to have him here. But also Roland's expertise goes beyond German borders. He has been executive member of the board of TAU Group in the Netherlands, which is an international group which employs more than 1,000 people operating with subsidiaries in 6 countries. He's chemist by training and also brings in broad experience on community involvement and support for assistance to redevelop brownfield land. Before handing over to Johanna, I, with that slide briefly, like to introduce you how we are working. Johanna and Sabine will start with their presentation on how assistance is provided, in particular to US communities. And whenever you have questions, when questions are coming up, you are warmly invited to, in particular, put them to the chat box, which is on the lower right-hand side on the screen. So you can type in your questions or any recommendations you like to give, which should be considered. We will also make a short break after the first part of the presentation, so we can also talk to one another, open the mics then. you can also send, if that is for whatever reason working easier, an email to webinar@de-us.net or tweet to us at the given Twitter account name on your screen. With that being said, I'd like to hand over to Johanne and warmly welcome you as a presenter, CCLR and DeusNet. We are looking forward to this webinar and to further webinars in the future. Johannes, it's a pleasure to having you here today. The floor is yours.
Johanna, kannst du uns hören? Okay.
Hi, sorry, can you hear me now?
Hi.
All right, I'm sorry about that. Well, thank you again for having me. So I will dive right into my presentation on the redevelopment assistance to brownfield communities in the U.S. So firstly, I wanted to get into the definition of a brownfield in the United States. It's a real property of which the expansion or redevelopment may be complicated by the presence or potential presence of a hazardous substance, pollutant, or contaminant. So we really wanted to highlight that it just has to be potentially contaminated to qualify as a brownfield and therefore qualify for funding and resources. A little bit on the history of brownfields. The Brownfields Law was enacted in 2002 as an amendment to the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act. It's specifically the Small Business Liability Relief and Brownfield Revitalization Act. And these sites are not NPL or Superfund sites, so they're a little bit lower risk, lower levels of contamination. The SBLRBRA provides protections for anyone who purchased a property after conducting all appropriate inquiry. It also clarifies the CERCLA liability protections and provides funds to enhance state and tribal response programs for redevelopment. So the brownfield redevelopment process is typically identifying properties, doing two different environmental assessments, the phase 1 assessment, which is comprised of site visits, interviews, and historical records of prior use of the site, and phase 2 assessments, which is site sampling. Then would be the cleanup of the site, and ultimately the goal is to sustainably redevelop the brownfield. Throughout this process, community engagement is very vital, so we urge communities to get involved in all aspects of this process. In the U.S., there are a number of different brownfield assistance providers. These include the EPA per se via grantees. There's the technical assistance to brownfields communities providers, which I will get into a little bit later on. There's CDFA, Groundworks USA, and HMTRI. And then also states usually have some individual specific assistance providers. So the EPA technical assistance to brownfield providers assists with all aspects of community revitalization. We do grant reviews, workshops, anything that can help a community to redevelop a brownfield site. CDFA provides mentoring to communities to find financing solutions to redevelopment. Groundworks USA assists with community engagement efforts, and HMTRI assists with preparation and implementation of environmental job training. So TAB's technical assistance to Brownfield Communities providers provide free assistance with Brownfield's redevelopment planning, environmental and economic development expertise. So that is tailored to specific community needs, fills service gaps, and is coordinated through city, tribal, and nonprofit entities. Communities are helped on a first-come, first-served basis, and this ultimately depends on staffing and funding availability, and there's no application process. So as long as we have the ability to, we can help anyone. The Technical Assistance to Brownfields program is split up into different regions by the U.S. So there are 3 different technical assistance providers. This includes the Center for Creative Land Recycling, which is the organization I work for, KSU, which is the organization that Sabina works for, and NJIT, which is listed in the gray, which is Region 1, 3, and 4. This program is funded by the U.S. EPA, and it's a national program and free to all communities. Through the Center for Creative Land Recycling, we provide technical assistance. We serve 3 EPA regions, which includes 11 states. We are regions 2, 9, and 10. In 2018, we served over 265 individual communities, reviewed 29 federal brownfields grants, which brought about $6.65 million in grants to 14 projects across the U.S. We also conducted 17 workshops, which drew in a total of 1,300 attendees, and we also have online education through webinars. So we had 11 webinars in 2018, which drew in also approximately 1,300 attendees. So I'm going to hand it off to Sabina from here. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me okay? I'm assuming you can. All right, switching over to the KSU TAB program. And right now we're just we're going to give you some statistics. And I should also mention that NGIT is the New Jersey Institute of Technology. And like KSU, that's a university, whereas CCLEAR is a not-for-profit organization. So KSU, the Kansas State University TAB, serves 4 EPA regions and 21 states. So basically we have, or KSU TAB has the entire middle of the United States, a rather large geographical area. KSU TAB also has the National Tribal Technical Assistance to Brownfields program and the national tools, and we'll get into that a little bit later. We have over 25 TAB partners from various disciplines, and that ranges from landscape architects over economic people, landscape architects, and our strategic planners. We have geologists, we have hydrogeologists. So it basically kind of everything that, or everybody that might be involved in and useful to brownfields revitalization. In 2018, the K-State TAB served over 150 individual communities. 50% of those had less than 100,000 people in population. 25 were even less than 10,000, and another 25% were tribal or environmental justice communities. There were about 30 workshops and 10 webinars conducted in 2018. Let me just go down here to NGIT. So this is from Colette, the director of the NGIT TAB. They serve 19 states, including the District of Columbia. And the difference here is that their core team, the difference to all other 2 TAB providers, that the NGIT core team has a multidisciplinary aspect. So you can see what kind of disciplinaries are represented there. They served more than 400 communities in 2018, but that includes, aside from the one-on-one technical assistance that they provided, also communities that were represented in their seminars, workshops, and boot camps. So here's a list of TAP services, and I'm not going to go through everything, but you can see that it's a great variety. I mean, it starts from identifying and inventorying brownfields, and that's one of the national tools that K-State has. It's called BIT, B-I-T, the Brownfields Inventory Tool. A lot of educational workshops and outreach, because that's one of the emphases that EPA places on the communities to apply for the big EPA grants. Funding sources, identification thereof. We work with a lot of communities, a lot of smaller and rural communities that don't have the capacity, they don't have the personnel, no environmental staff to go after and even become knowledgeable about what's out there that could potentially help them in a revitalization project. So all these things they seem to be pretty rudimentary, but they are very, very important to the communities that we work with. All the tabs review grant applications, and that applies to the EPA grants, the cleanup, the assessment, revolving loan, and what have you, the other grants that EPA puts out in conjunction with brownfields. The restriction is for the TAP providers that we cannot write the grants for the communities. We can review them, but that's it. We're done with that. And I think maybe we also need to mention that there is no research that can be conducted under these TAB services or the TAB provider grants. So I want to talk a little bit about the national tools just briefly. So they are available for free to anybody. They are, we have the TAB Easy here. That is the grant writing tool for assessment and cleanup grants. And we have the Brownfields inventory tool. This is a little bit about the Brownfields inventory tool. Basically, it's a huge database. It's password protected, and you can upload all and any site data that you like, photos, reports. You can generate maps. It was designed specifically for communities who would like to track their grant activities, because one of the required activities under the brownfields, under the EPA brownfields grants, is that communities have to report their progress into acres, which is the big EPA database. And the BIT tool connects right into acres, so communities can dump all the data that they have in BIT and produce that into acres. So it's very easy to import and export data. This is how it looks like on the left-hand side. Here you can see the content, a little bit of what's in there. So you have all your site information, like where is the site, who owns it, and property transfers and all that good stuff. You have the sampling and cleanup, institutional controls, a bunch of admin stuff. So that's pretty much that. Let me see what I have next. This is TAP Easy, and yeah, this was a screenshot I meant to change, because you can see there's a bunch of my stuff on there, and we have to, every year when the new grants come out, when EPA issues the RFP, the request for proposal, we have to adjust and make changes, of course, accordingly in TAP Easy, and then we have to test it out. So that's what most of this is for. But TAP Easy is a tool that we developed at K-State TAB, basically for the EPA assessment and cleanup grants. At one point in time, we were contemplating doing it for RLFs and other grants, but we stepped away from that for now. Again, this is a tool that's available on the web. It's for free. Communities can access it on an individual basis, like say they have one grant writer, or this particular person can collaborate with others on a grant application. We added successful grant applications as basically a resource, because there are a lot of communities who do this for the first time and don't really know how to write this. EPA grant applications are a different beast in that they don't really can compare them to anything else. It's very unique. Let me just say that. So the more information you have, the more help you can get as a community who has never done that before, the better off you are. So those are those tools. We're stepping over now more into what EPA per se can provide to brownfields communities. So this is a slide that I borrowed from EPA, and basically it explains how their land revitalization revitalization process works. So first, the community needs, of course, are established. Then comes the project development. How do we go about revitalizing a site or an area? And that's, for example, where the tabs come in, and the land revitalization contractors that EPA has on staff. They have the environmental justice small grants, building blocks, and then the area-wide planning grants can play a role. Resources for assessment, cleanup, of course, from the state side as well. And then the resource mapping, and that's where CDFR comes in, or CDFA, the Council of Development Finance Agencies. That's an EPA grantee who specializes in mapping out resources for financial resources for a specific project that a community might want to do in the brownfield arena. So this process is designed to take a brownfield through from assessment, cleanup, to redevelopment, to a sustainable redevelopment, and all the while engaging the community, engaging the stakeholders, coordinating with existing efforts, and building partnership and maintaining partnerships. I mean, that's a big emphasis that EPA has. EPA assistance can have direct form and indirect form. Direct is, of course, the grants that we already talked about a little bit. They also provide targeted brownfields assessments, so the phase 1 and the phase 2. They would first defer to the state where the brownfield site is located in, to the state agencies, but if those agencies ran out of money, the region will step in and perform these assessments. They provide one-on-one technical assistance, contractual support through the contractors that they have, for example, for technical workshops and such. And then some other technical assistance. And among them, the Brownfields, the National Brownfields Conference, which is, most of you probably have been to already. It's a great networking opportunity. The indirect assistance then would be through the EPA grantees, and there is a slew of those listed there. And then also the technical assistance from the state and tribal response programs. So it's pretty much all encompassing what they can provide and are providing. The next slide explains a little bit about the EPA grants that are available. And again, I'm not going to go through everything. I just wanted to point out eligible applicants. So usually these are local governments, tribes, quasi-governmental agencies like regional councils, and not-for-profits. So this is a slide that came out, I think it was like November 2018. And it reflects the changes that were made last year as far as the grants are concerned. For example, the one that you see in the middle in green, the multi-purpose grant, that was a brand new grant type last year. It was for assessment and cleanup in one grant. And you can see it was originally slated for $1 million per award. And I think what actually happened, they came out with $800,000 on that. For those that are cost shares, the assessment grant on the left side, I mean, there is no cost share involved for applicants that are awarded one of those. And there are site-specific grants. They can go into a coalition, like a community banding together with 2 or 3 others as a grant applicant. So there are different kinds of scenarios that can be had. We have the revolving loan fund grants. Those are specifically only for cleanup. They don't come around every year. That's usually every second year. The environmental workforce development and job training grant, also not every year, usually on a 2-year cycle. And then the assistance to small and tribal communities via the states and the tribes. And those are non-competitive grants. The states here in the US get a certain amount from EPA every year to provide this kind of assistance, as do the tribes. So here's a little funding history about what happened when, like as of 2005, you see we had $76.7 million of grant funding available through EPA, and then it got less and less and less and less. The last cycle was just announced yesterday, and I had updated the slide, but I didn't get it to Andrea in time. And now I think we have for this award year, which was just announced yesterday, we had 64.4 or some such thing, but definitely $64 million. So it was more. Most of that was due to the fact that now we have these big multi-purpose grants in there. So Brownfield grants really have generated a lot of success. I mean, since 1995 through 2018, there were more than 21,764 properties assessed. It leveraged more than 21 billion in brownfield cleanup and redevelopment funding from private and public sectors, generated 97,000 jobs. And on average, it was a return of $17.79 for every dollar of federal brownfields dollars invested. So that's a pretty good track record, especially for smaller and rural communities. This is really sometimes their only in to get their brownfield sites addressed. EPA has also some other tools aside from these brownfields grants that come out on an annual basis or biannual basis. So they have the building blocks for sustainable communities. Those are usually 2-day workshops, and communities need to compete for those to be able to have a workshop in their community. We have local foods and local places, the cool and connected, and the healthy places for healthy people. So most of those are technical assistance projects, workshops, and not actually individual grants. So here's like a summary of state and federal resources as far as like EPA is concerned, and some other, I threw some other feds in there too. But for the free assessments, just to see what's going on with the site, obviously the EPA grants, EPA per se, and the states are in line for that. So a community has access to get all that done for free. The same with the cleanup. I mean, if a community is applying for a cleanup grant or a revolving loan fund grant, that can be handled for free. Redevelopment, USDA has grants, HUD has grants, EDA, and there's a slew of other redevelopment tools that can be used, and grants, loans that are available from other federal agencies. And then, of course, the free technical assistance that the TABs, the Technical Assistance to Brownfield Communities programs provide, and the state provides, and EPA provides to a certain extent as well. So lastly, we have some state resource examples, because not every state runs their brownfields program the same way. I mean, most states do provide phase 1 and phase 2 environmental site assessment. They do asbestos screening surveys. They do lead-based paint and mold surveys. They all have VCP oversight, the voluntary cleanup program oversight, which means that the state oversees the cleanup efforts, but the communities would have to pay for that. And the fee that's associated with that varies, but that's an eligible expense, for example, under an EPA cleanup grant. Some states now have deconstruction grants, and I pulled Iowa out here. They have the derelict building program, which grants on an annual basis grants to 12 small rural Iowa communities with a population of less than 5,000 to help them deconstruct or renovate brownfields, abandoned structures, remove asbestos, and basically limit construction and demolition materials going to the landfill. Nebraska has a similar program, but it's structured a little bit differently. A lot of states have underground storage tank and dry cleaning trust funds in which operators of these kind of businesses pay in on an annual basis. That's a requirement for them to be able to operate in a given state. So this trust fund builds up, and then if there is, like, say, an orphan site where the owner cannot be identified anymore, or the owner is not capable of paying cleanup costs or even an assessment, then the fund will step in and take care of that. Asbestos removal aid. I mean, that is done by several states. Asbestos removal and remediation can be extremely expensive. Nebraska, for example, has a cost match of 50% up to $10,000. And other states, Kansas, for example, has a flat out 50-50 match. So a lot of states have something like that. Kansas does structural assessments. That's a new one that they just kind of piloted last year. And they do some smaller cleanups, but that's kind of petering out. Cleanup assistance via state-run revolving loan funds, where communities can apply to the state to receive low-cost or no-cost loans to address their cleanup needs, including demolition here in Indiana and site acquisition. Demolition in the United States for a community who doesn't have the money to do so, and a lot of these brownfield sites, well, not a lot, I think, well, yes, let's just say a lot of experience, cannot be saved because they're structurally unsafe. And they would need to come down. But with the EPA grants for cleanup, you cannot address demolition. And they're really the only federal agencies that will have grants for that would be HUD and USDA, but then it's tied to the reuse of those sites. So here in Indiana, having an RLF that allows for demolition is pretty substantial. Okay, and I think that's my last slide, and then Johanna will take over from here. Oh, I guess I have one more. Didn't realize that. Let me go back. Hang on. So there's one more, the income tax credits, and this was a Mississippi example. Basically, the dollars that were paid by a community for assessment, investigation, remediation, monitoring, what have you, would be eligible for a 25% tax credit for the tax year these costs are incurred. So for Mississippi, it was $40,000 annually, and the maximum tax write-off was not to exceed $150,000 over the lifetime of the project. All right.
And so I wanted to highlight just two more examples. In California, there is a revolving loan fund through the California Department of Toxic Substances Control that provides below market low interest loans for cleanup of substances where redevelopment is planned. And there's also area-wide groundwater investigation grants in Washington that award up to $500,000 to local governments to investigate and clean up widespread groundwater contamination. So those are just two more examples of funding that can be used in certain states. And then finally, here's our contact information. Thank you so much for your time, and please do reach out if you have any questions after this presentation.
So we can take any questions now if there are some, or Andrea, are we
Thank you very much, Sabina. And
whoop, everything's gone.
You have now all the opportunity to ask questions to Sabina and Johanna. So if there are any questions, please go ahead. I received one question by mail, which I can maybe put directly to you. You both mentioned a couple of webinars that have been conducted over the last year. Have those been recorded, and are they available? The downloads, the records, are they available on websites? Can they be accessed? And maybe what have been the key topics of those webinars?
From the K-State side, the webinars differ. I mean, we did a series of basic brownfields webinars, and I can just, while the next presentation goes up, I can put the link in the chat box. I mean, on the K-State website, you can access all the different workshops, the content, and the webinars that have been conducted. There are special webinars sometimes that address, for example, like the opportunity zones. That was a hot topic last year when they came out. So there was one there. So it kind of depends always on the flavor of the season, so to speak, because we don't want to repeat all the time what kind of webinars we do. I believe we had one on community engagement. So it runs the gamut of revitalization topics.
And same goes for the Center for Creative Land Recycling. We do record all of our webinars, and the slides are available on our website. I can also share that link in the chat box after Andreas starts his presentation. But our topics also range anywhere from technical topics such as vapor intrusion or phytoremediation to community engagement or planning for reuse. So webinar topics are vary in technicality and topic.
Okay. Sounds also like topics particularly regarding the technology where an exchange also transatlantic makes sense, as it's maybe not only focused to some specific institutional context. So let's explore what we can do in this area as well. Are there other questions from the audience joining us today? I can see a couple of folks in the list. You can unmute yourself and just talk directly or put something to the chat box. If that is not the case, then if it comes up, please go ahead. But if for the moment that is not the case, then I suggest that we continue with the presentation and that we now shift perspective from the United States and go to North-Rhine-Westphalia in Germany. And as I do not want to take the presentation from Roland Arndt, Managing Director of the Okay. The sound mode was changed again so that we can listen to Roland Arndt as a presenter, as I said, Managing Director of the AAV. And Roland, the floor is yours.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Stefan. I hope everyone
unmuted yourself. You can directly go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I hope everyone can hear me, and I would like to explain you something about the AAV, what we can do to assist the communities in North Rhine-Westphalia with their problems with brownfields, with contaminated sites, and just some basic information. On the map here you can see Germany with the 16 federal states. One is North Rhine-Westphalia, it's the red one here. And within North Rhine-Westphalia, you also have a very historical industrial area, which is called the Ruhr area. Perhaps you have heard about that. And North Rhine-Westphalia is the biggest federal state by inhabitants with 80 million, and we have close to 400 different municipalities there, and it's still the main industrial area of Germany. You can see on the right bottom a picture of an, for example, a very typical historical production area. It's a steel production, and also coal mining was very often in our area, and but also a lot of smaller or middle-sized companies. Since 1996, the Ministry of Environment counts the number of the potentially contaminated sites, and you can see the development here. We are still in a growing process. For example, from I think it's 2014 to 2017, it was about 11,000 more sites which were identified. And you can also see, because the dark red part of the column, that are the former industrial sites, so the real brownfields are the ones which are mainly growing. The blue ones are the waste dumps. It's a bit more stable there. So that's about North Rhine-Westphalia. And now I would give you some main information about the AAV. We are organized in a kind of public-private partnership. And that means that representatives of the government of North Rhine-Westphalia, and that is represented by 3 governmental departments, the one which is responsible for environment, the one which is responsible for construction, and the third one is the one which is responsible for economy, are by law members of the AAV. Also, every municipality of North Rhine-Westphalia is member of our association by law, and we also have the possibilities for companies to get a membership of the AAV, and so we have also around, I would say, 70 to 80 relevant companies which are also are part of what we are doing. And all these groups together come together in special committees within our association, and there we are really deciding together about the perspective of our project. So what are the aims, what are the main tasks for planning, and also the financial issues. All this is coordinated by all the parties in the committees. And beside that, it's really also a kind of know-how center for remediation of contaminated land and brownfield redevelopment. So we try to find a common understanding for the different things we have to deal with, but also what are the best innovative or pragmatic ways to remediate, what are the best remediation solutions. And also we take together responsibility for the land development. We have a lot of pressure because the companies, but much more for housing, a lot of sites are necessary, and there are some, how can I say that, different positions to use Greenland or to use, of course, what is much better, brownfields for these developments. So next slide. Our tasks, they are all defined in an own act. So the AAV has an own AAV act. And that are some abbreviated points out of that. It's good to say that our main task is really the management of projects. So we are really dealing with these brownfield redevelopment processes. We execute them, and we are also bringing 80% of the money for the municipalities. So they are only paying 20%. And the main tasks are, for example, the assessment, so investigation, planning of the remediation and the remediation, and what is our main point for today, the redevelopment of brownfields for a reuse, and that should have also the background to reduce the consumption of other areas which are in a more natural state or are coming from agricultural purposes. And the third point, which is by the amount of time we spend in it, not so much, but important for our knowledge and also, for example, for costs for the remediation, that we are developing and testing new technologies and also innovative methods for remediation and for the brownfield redevelopment. Additionally, we can give our members, so the land of North Rhine, the people of the ministries of North Rhine-Westphalia, the municipalities and also the companies which are members of the AOV, we can give them additionally advice and support to everything what has to do with our main tasks, so remediation and brownfield redevelopment. If they have really problems with technical or legal difficulties. And we also have a contaminated site risk fund, which is constructed for the communities to help them to sell the sites after the remediation if an investor is still thinking about a kind of rest risk and will not pay for it. So we can then give a kind of guarantee if something pops up during the construction works. How is it working? I will briefly show you the process, what the municipalities can do with us. So normally it's a kind of an informal request at the beginning that they are calling us or asking for a meeting, and then they show us what they want to do with the site and what the problems are, and normally we try to find out whether or not it's basically a project we can do. So we are often asking for additional information, and if it's a kind of a go after that, then the municipalities can bring in their projects for a decision process, and we are checking the legal and also the technical conditions, and of course ownership of the site. If no one else can be held liable for the remediation, whether or not the remediation is in the responsibility of the municipality, and of course whether or not some early measures have to be taken, what is really the problem with the contaminations on site. After that, the new projects are presented, and there is a decision-making process in the AAV committees. If it's a go, normally it is, then we continue with a contract under public law between the municipality and the AAV, where everything is really on detail written down. At the end, really the goals for the remediation and for the reuse, and after that we are starting with the execution. So we are really tendering everything for the municipalities. We are doing the contracting, the whole management and control of the execution, and we are checking whether or not it's well done, and also the accounting is going via the AAV. So no additional tasks are necessary for the municipalities. At the end, they are getting a kind of invoice about their 20% from us, and that's it. So it's a very quite comfortable way to help them to redevelop brownfields. Just a short picture, I hope it's sharp enough, where our projects are located at the moment. That are the red dots. We have 57 projects active, and thereof 31 are real brownfield redevelopment. The other ones are more real only that we decontaminate the sites, for example, also chemical washing areas or other things, or also former production of chemical substances or else. So that are the red dots, and we also have a special program at the moment where we develop brownfields for residential buildings. That has to do with a high pressure on that issue at the moment in North-Rhine-Westphalia. There are 10 additional brownfield redevelopment projects, and till now around 65 projects were completed. That means in 30 years, the AAV is now 30 years old, or 31 years now, and till now it's about 160 million euros we have spent for all this work we have done, and we are doing this with 30 people now. So we are giving a lot of orders to engineering bureaus, construction companies which are specialized for groundwater remediation, for example. Now I would continue with some brief project descriptions, project examples. The picture shows a site of size, I think it was 65,000 square meters, or it is 65,000 square meters. It's a former production area of a special type of knives, which were used by companies or in the agricultural area. And the center, of course, is what we are doing is the dismantling and also the remediation, but there are a lot of other tasks we are taking care of for the municipality. So in that case, we have a part of the buildings which we have to protect. So I think it's called monument conservation. We have to take care on the protection of the species, also for the landscape. In North Rhine-Westphalia, due to the Second World War, we have a lot of problems with bombs. So also welfare material is always something we have to take care on. And of course, which is also very important, to protect the residents and also to take care on the publicity for the project, not to run into problems with the people which are living in that area. So that is the general thing we are doing. This project is at the moment in a status that we have the remediation planning executed. It's also confirmed by the municipality, and we will execute it in the end of this year. And the next one shows a project which is completed. It was a former chemical plant which was developed to a new industrial site, size of around 45,000 square meters, and they produced a kind of protein adhesive. So what you need to for wood, it's a wood glue. I hope it's the right wording. And they made it from leather waste. So it was really a very dirty kind of production. The picture shows how they deal with the waste, and a lot of this waste was also, after the extraction, was dumped at the site. The company went bankrupt, and at the end, a big soil and groundwater contamination, mainly with chromium and PCB, went over to the municipality. They bought the site to develop this new industrial estate. And we did it from 2004 to 2005, where the soil remediated mainly by excavation and external disposal. It was around 150,000 tons of hazardous waste. Until 2012, there was a big groundwater remediation ongoing. I think the whole project, we spent about 11 million euros to clean it up. That was the example of a brownfield redevelopment to an industrial site. The next one shows a very nice project which was in the real city center of a middle-sized city of North Rhine-Westphalia, where a former municipal gas work was developed to really a high-level quarter. And it was a smaller site with 11,000 square meters, and the gas works worked really in the past, so from 1858 to 1918. And after the demolition of the gasworks, it was used for some other things, like a municipal swimming bath and also for electrical power station. Then in the 90s, it really went to a kind of uncontrolled parking area, really brownfield. And in the time from 94 to 2009, there were a lot of investigations, risk assessments, and planning for the remediation made, which were executed in briefly one and a half year in 2010, 2011, with a dismantling, demolition, and also soil remediation. And you can see on the two pictures that was how it looked before we remediated it, and afterward they really used it for this very nice quarter, which was called Museum Quarter, which really puts this area of the city of Hamm, that was the name of the city, on a higher level. And the last example shows how we can deal with real high contaminations in another way. In this case, we developed a former tar factory to a citizens park that was in I think in Bochum. Perhaps you know Bochum, one also from the former coal mining areas of North Rhine-Westphalia. About 40,000 square meters, and there was over a long time a tar distillation and production of roofing paper ongoing. The picture shows really how it looked in the past, but also more or less when we took the site over. There were also a lot of contaminations going to the ground during the Second World War due to bombing at that time. And there was more or less the whole area deep contaminated with PAH, BTX, and hydrocarbons and phenols. And the only, it was not the only way, but the way which was decided on was to really bring the area on a higher level with a park for the people which are living close to the factory. You can see that bit here that are really housing of people, and also I think in that area. And due to the necessary protection of the people to the contaminations, we decided to build a kind of containment. So we did not excavate the contaminations, but we put on a kind of ceiling after all the dismantling and the dismantling also of the tar tanks and all the other things on site. So we put a ceiling on the it was a kind of profiling, then a ceiling on it, and a kind of handling of the rain which could fall on the site with a special draining trench, and also a full renovation of the sewer. And additionally, the groundwater was monitored parallel. And at the end, it's how you can see it on that picture. It was really a nice park, or it is now really a nice park, and also the quality of that area is also now really on a higher level. So I would like to end with that, only to show you what is possible and what we can do as AAV for the municipalities. There's a lot of work to do, and it also needs a lot of I would say idealism and energy from our people to do all these things together with the municipalities. So I think I will end with that. If you have any question, please call or give them to me, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Roland. This was a really interesting presentation of how this special Not sure if you can still hear me.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry. So thanks again for your presentation. There is one question in the chat box. I'm sure if you can see it by Sabine, your co-presenter, and maybe Andrea can also put us into connection mode again. I'm just reading out the question Sabine is asking.
Okay. Can I?
So here we go.
Yes.
We now can talk directly to one another, and
Okay.
maybe Sabine, you can directly take the word and talk to Roland, directly repeating your question.
Sure. Well, I was just wondering, like, do all participating communities pay the same amount of money as, I'm assuming those are annual dues maybe, into the AAV, or is there like a tiered approach depending on the financial ability of a participating community?
No, it's 6 cents per inhabitant. So they all pay the same, but the big cities pay a lot more than the smaller ones, and it's on an annual basis. That's right. That's one part of our financing, and the other one is coming from a special kind of I will not say tax, but I don't know a better word for that. That is paid to the Ministry of Environment, which has to do with the use of groundwater. So that are the two parts where we get most of our money from. And
So the
other,
tax, oh, sorry,
yeah.
go on.
No, it's fine. Yeah.
I was wondering, the tax, is that like a state tax or is that a federal tax?
It's at the end not really a tax, but if you, for example, are a company and you are using groundwater for your production, you have to pay for that, and that money is collected by the Ministry of Environment, and they are giving a part of that to us for our work. Yeah.
Awesome, great, thank you.
Yeah. And the other question?
And from our audience, from Martha Faust, there's a question if the AAV is unique to North-Rhine-Westphalia, or if other regional governments in Germany have structures that are similar in function and purpose to the AAV. Roland, can you tell us about that?
It's also it's so that also other federal states have special bodies, associations, or a special part of ministry which are dealing with contaminated land remediation and also with brownfield redevelopment. But the model we have with this kind of private-public partnership and also with this knowledge center is unique for Germany as well. So it's something special. It has, of course, also to do with the big amount of work and all the contaminated sites we have here, which is different in the other parts of Germany. So North Rhine-Westphalia has a special role in that.
And this is Sabine again. I was wondering, do you have like special selection criteria for sites that are being brought forth by the communities? I mean, I'm assuming you will not take any old brownfield site into the program.
No, that's what I tried to explain with this project process. So we have not a kind of clear checklist to say we are only taking this or this kind of projects, but we have some internal guidelines we are following. So it really depends on the that they really need us. Is that a good explanation? Normally the site must have a lot of problems to be developed without us, and then we really have one of the main points to take that over, and the other one really is that no private person is in the back and has to pay for that normally by law. So normally most of the sites we are dealing with are in the ownership of the municipalities, or they are trying to buy them during the discussions with us whether or not we can take them over.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. And I would also have one more question, which is, Sabine mentioned that $17.29 return for every dollar of federal brownfield dollar invested in the US since 1995, I guess a number on average returned. Roland, do you have any such, let's say, economic assessment about how worthy the investment into brownfield in North-Rhine-Westphalia has been so far since AAV is in action, or for whatever time you can maybe give such an estimation?
Yeah, I hope I got it in the right way. So we spent till now around 160 million in our projects, and I know that I think it's about 340, 350 million, which is additionally spent by the Ministry of Environment in other programs we have to support municipalities, for example, for Kataster or also for investigation issues. That's one. On the other hand, so I'm still not sure that I got it. On the other hand, we get some money back from the municipalities, which has to do with the higher value per square meter after the remediation, or we can fix in our contracts that they have to let us participate on the selling when they sell the site afterwards after the remediation to an investor, and all that till now brings less than 10 million back to us. So that gives perhaps a bit an answer. Did I get it, Stefan, or was it another?
Let's say on the more direct financial streams. I assume that in the US number, but maybe Sabina or Johanna, you can clarify that in the $18 you get as a return on each dollar invested, public money. I assume it also includes revenues from, let's say, income tax or tax revenues of business that starts operating after a site cleanup has taken place over the next years. Assuming it would have not been there without the remediation activity, something like that, most likely is the.
For that we have.
Would it be as I assume it? But maybe Sabine, you know better.
Well, I think that is correct. I mean, that's mashing everything together that would not have been there, as you said, Stefan, if that site would not have been addressed.
Okay, I'm asking because I think it's a very, very impressive number. So, and it makes a clear point that public money invested here is also financially on a good track, not only in a sense of improving the living conditions in the sites and reducing the potential harm. So something I think most communities see as a first burden can actually pay out to become a big advantage. So with that being said, and seeing that there are also no further questions in the chat box, maybe my last question is to Sabine, Johanna, and Roland, if you have any final remarks for us, which maybe was the most interesting that you learned during this webinar today. Is there something that you take home, Sabine?
Boy, I think hearing about the AAV, I mean, that was astounding. I wish we would have something similar here, where communities would actually be willing to, to pay into something to get something. I mean, here for us, I think, and I know the circumstances are different because, I mean, the tabs were really invented, so to speak, to help communities that are not able to address their own brownfield sites. And those are not the A sites, that would move by themselves. But I mean, as Roland said too, I mean, those are sites that do need help. At the same time, we don't deal with these highly contaminated sites. Those in the United States would go on the NPL list, probably the national priority list. So we are dealing more with mildly contaminated sites in the brownfields arena. So I found that concept very different and very interesting. I mean, and also granted that Nordrhein-Westfalen and Germany in general, I mean, the pressure on the land is much more than it is here, for example, in the Midwest. I mean, we have so much more space, right? And gosh, if a brownfield doesn't get developed, I mean, who cares, really? But also, of course, there is the community that's affected by it. But I mean, a community here in the United States, I think they really need to make their case as to why, and to their community too, why do they want to redevelop it, and why would it be of benefit to the communities? And if you deal with like rural communities, a lot of time, either they are used to seeing that, or there sometimes is resistance to redevelopment. Let's just put it that way.
Okay, thanks for that. Johanna, how is it looking in California, which is much more densely populated, maybe a bit more comparable to Germany? Any take-home lessons for you from that webinar?
Stefan, whom are you calling now or asking?
I was asking Johanna first, but
okay, Johanna,
maybe her
okay.
mic is still muted, so maybe you want to go first, Roland. What was maybe of interest for you in particular from the US side?
I think what we have here in our federal state is really a unique example, and I think the things we have seen from the US side were much bigger, and there is a lot of more work done. What I heard now from Sabine, that there is still resistance for brownfield redevelopment. That's something I would like to pick up because it's really also a political process we are dealing with. So I would really say that the right decisions have to be made by the politicians, that we can do more, and also all the things which are really necessary. And what I tried to point out, and that was also seen by the two ladies, what we can generate by a brownfield redevelopment. So it's really something which needs, I would say, a kind of joint lobby as well. So that's good that we can do that also in this network, Stefan.
And if I can just clarify, I mean, the resistance for brownfields redevelopment, I mean, obviously that's not everywhere. But I mean, I've experienced that in some smaller communities where the actually resistance is also like the landowners. You know, I mean, it's this trepidation of the feds coming in, regardless if it's as a grantee or not directly traipsing on their land and finding something that they potentially would be responsible for. So, I mean, that's kind of like a different kind of mindset. And as I said, it's not everywhere.
Yeah, but we have that also here. So I will not make it too positive. There's also still an ongoing discussions. For example, people which are going to construct new sites, new housing, new sites for companies. They normally are not happy if they have to do that on a brownfield. So it's I think it's normally it's a case that you have to convince them that they can do it, that it has an effort, that it is possible to do it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that they're getting something out of it too.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
With that being said, we have to show they are getting something out of it, and we have ideas on how to do it, and obviously we can learn from one another about the one or the other interesting, innovative way of doing that. I'd like to close our webinar today with a very warm thanks to Johanna, Sabine and Roland as our presenters today, and also to Andrea, who helped us getting running this webinar online and is our good soul and supporter of DeosNet. We are all looking forward to talking to you again in about 4 weeks' time, when we will have our next webinar. Maybe Andrea, you can go one slide before that one. It will be by John Notlock and Scott Truex on smart cities, looking beyond technology, including technology innovation with societal innovation for the city of tomorrow. You will find the announcement for that webinar very soon online, as well as the recording of today's webinar. Again, thanks again to Roland, Sabine, and Johanna for joining us today. Looking forward to staying in touch and to welcoming you also on our website at DeosNet, including the intranet website, where you can find a lot of resources. Some of them mentioned today, many more unmentioned today. We are looking forward to having you with us. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye for today.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yep, bye.
Bye.